Gracefully Graying. I'm your host, attorney Henry Gornbein. Please visit and like our Gracefully Graying YouTube channel and our site at gracefullygraying.com. Today on Gracefully Graying, this is a first. We are actually doing an international video with renowned artist and photographer Marcus Lyon, who is currently Zooming with us from London in England in his studio. Marcus, welcome to Gracefully Graying.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you for welcoming me.
It's a pleasure. First of all, why don't you tell us about your background and who you are?
Well, ostensibly, I'm a village boy. I grew up in tiny, rural British communities, 200 people plus. So in many ways, I'm a product of rural Britain. Small villages, agricultural communities, simple places. And in my late teens, I traveled a little bit in the world. I worked on farms in Australia and took time off in Asia, and then returned and had my first city experience and went and studied political science at Leeds University. And it was those trips abroad and that time at Leeds University that led me to the camera, and a sense that the camera was a place where I could find a voice, that I could tell stories, that I had a power that was worth pursuing. And I've been a photographer and an image maker, an artist and a community leader ever since leaving university age 21.
You've been on TED Talk. Tell us about that.
Well, TED's an amazing process. They're very organized. They're very clear about what you need to produce and how you produce it. They do a lot of mentoring and bringing you on. I had a very specific idea I wanted to talk about identity and about what I call a challenge talk. It's a challenge talk. I wanted to challenge the audience to look at their own identities and their own roles in their communities and their neighborhoods, and ask themselves about how much they could be more than they already were. So it was a great joy. I'm still pretty amazed that the TED to date in 2020 has seen, I think it's been seen by 150,000 people. And I'm sure I've never talked to that many people individually across my whole 55-year-old life. So it's a powerful platform. And it was a great challenge. It was one of those butterfly moments, or what I call a butterfly moment, when, you know, I felt like I was truly being challenged and I was truly stepping up to the plate. So very exciting and delighted to have been given that opportunity.
Marcus, you've been involved in many brilliant projects, for lack of a better word, and you started something called the Human Atlas. Tell us about that and what prompted you to do that.
Well, over several decades, I'd been living a sort of dual life, so to speak. Nothing too suspicious, I hasten to add. And I'd been doing a lot of social entrepreneurial work, and I'd been doing a lot of my artwork. And I think those two streams of my life needed to come together at some stage and become a river and begin to make the journey to the coast. And so what I did is I brought together my portrait skills as a portrait artist with my social entrepreneurial skills. And we went in search of building a process where we could bring a specified number, normally 100, remarkable individuals together in a book and in exhibition and in digital formats through photography, soundscapes, and DNA mapping. So we bring the visual, spoken, and genetic codes of our lives of a specified group of people together to create an atlas of humanity. And we build these atlases on the key foundation of a nomination process. So we get commissioned or encouraged or asked to create human atlases on specified geographies, and then we go to those geographies and we create a nomination process where individuals who are in the know, journalists, community leaders, grassroots activists, nominate people within their communities who are moving the needle in significant ways in social change in all its forms. And then we bring those 100 people together, photograph them, interview them, and analyze their ancestral DNA, map it all together to tell a deeper truth about how we both self-author and co-author a more hopeful future.
Now, one of them, and this is how I found you, quite frankly, through an article in the Free Press about i.Detroit Atlas. Why Detroit? Tell us how you came about doing i.Detroit.
Well, I've always had a long connection with Michigan. My father remarried an American who is got a deep and long connection to Michigan. My stepsister, who I now call my sister, lives in just outside Traverse City. So I'd been flying through Detroit for many years and had always been fascinated by the city. You know, obviously as a child of the 60s, you know, I'm very versed in Motown. And as a young student coming to London, techno was all the boom then. So there's the musical influence. So, but also, you know, there's a great well of fascination in Detroit across the world. I mean, it's a remarkable city. So I'd always wanted to do a project in Detroit. But the reason we actually came to do the Human Atlas is my Somos Brazil Human Atlas, a human atlas of the nation of Brazil, the change agents of Brazil, landed on the desk of Rip Rapson of the Kresge Foundation. And Rip, as the president, has a discretionary fund to support things he thinks are important. And he took one look at the Human Atlas of Brazil and said, get that artist to this city now. I'm going to fund a Human Atlas of the change agents of Detroit. I'm going to pick up the full tab. I want this done here to tell the story of our people with our own words. And I think that was the thing, you know, Rip saw very clearly from the go-get that he could commission a piece of work where the voice of Detroit would be heard, because he, as many Detroiters know, the story of Detroit is so often misrepresented. It's so often told in the wrong way. It's framed in the wrong way. And it tells stories that really are the stories that outsiders believe to be true, and then they come to Detroit and they look for the stories, they look for the things that back up their preconceptions, whereas we came to Detroit to tell your story in your way.
How are the 100 people selected? I mean, I've looked at the video you did, and you know, you're talking about people of every ethnic and racial, religious background, all walks of life. So it's fascinating. So tell us some more about how people were selected.
I mean, it's very important in our Human Atlas process to represent the diversity in our society in as accurate way as we can. Obviously, we're not looking at exact demographics and then mapping to that, but we're definitely looking at the demographics and we're working to that as an outline. So what we do is we get community leaders and grassroots activists, journalists, people in the know, people who really understand the city to nominate individuals who are doing remarkable work. And then we put together a nomination or a selection committee. And that group of people help guide me and my producers and colleagues through a process where we can choose the 100 who represent the widest cross-section of all the things that are happening in that particular jurisdiction. So obviously in Detroit is 82% African American, so we were looking predominantly at that community, but we wanted to look at people who were working in water equity, racial equity, housing crisis, issues to do with community building, education, health, the arts, creativity, science, mental health, entrepreneurs. So we build very sophisticated, what we call gap sheets, where we look at the different spaces that everybody's working in, and then we analyze that in a 40 or 50 column spreadsheet and work out how we can create the most elegant group of people who represent as many of the fields of human endeavor in that space as is humanly possible. So it's very intentional. We're very, very careful. We're building through individual profile to a larger piece that really tells the story in as accurate a way as we possibly can through the limitations of 100 voices telling the story of many hundreds of thousands.
How much time did you spend in Detroit? Obviously, you took all the photographs. So when did this occur?
A human atlas is pretty much a 3-year project. I mean, we can do it in a shorter time if we really push, but it's really a 3-year project from the beginning of the research to the point where we publish and can exhibit. Our actual time on the ground in Detroit is probably something in the region of 6 months.
And what did you find most memorable about the people and photos that you took for this i.Detroit Human Atlas?
Well, I mean, as I'm sure you can tell, you know, I'm a great lover of America and all things American. I spent a great deal of time in the US and have a great fondness for your people and your enthusiasm. But as with many outsiders, we often can see Americans as quite two-dimensional and super friendly right from the get-go, you know, really friendly. And that's lovely. And we welcome that. But in Detroit, what I liked particularly was the 3 dimensions I found in the people there. You know, it's a very deep place. It's got a lot of history, you know, enormous number of people who came to Detroit through the Great Migration, which I think is a very significant factor in how the city actually manifests itself today. But I think what we saw was a grittiness and a resilience. And we also saw the ability to challenge and ask the difficult questions. So we found that people asked us really difficult questions at the outset, really pushed us hard. You know, why you? Why a white man? Why a middle-class white man from Britain is the person who's going to come and tell our story accurately? I mean, what makes you think you have the right or the skill set to do this job? And I really liked that, and I really appreciated that challenge, and I found it very honest and made me feel the right way about what I was approaching, and made me feel very invested in telling the story of Detroit correctly. But what I loved after that is once you've passed that test, you're part of the family, and you get welcomed in Detroit like you are a brother, not an other. And I found that incredibly powerful, that sense of challenge, that grittiness, that resilience, and then followed by, you know, real Detroit love.
How did you overcome the questioning and reticence of people to say, here you are from, you know, the United Kingdom, and you're the one focusing on us?
Well, I think there's a transactional part to that, and there's an emotional part. I mean, the transactional part was, you know, we came and we had a meeting with 50 community leaders, and they gave me the grilling, and I think I passed that test. You know, they asked me all the difficult questions, and then those 50 people went back to their respective communities and neighborhoods and said, you know, there's this fella Marcus Lyon who's coming to do this project, and we think he's up to the challenge. And then I think the emotional side is, you know, just being a listener, being a friend to Detroit, being someone who really wanted to tell the story accurately. And, you know, as we always say, you know, the Human Atlas is, you know, we're, as a team, we're the portal within which other people can tell their own stories. You know, we're not manipulating things particularly. We're going and creating interviews, which we then create soundscapes out of, which we then mount on an image activated app. And if you were in one of our Human Atlases, Henry, you would swipe your device with the i.Detroit app on it across your portrait, and then you would talk back to the person who was listening to you, who was looking at your portrait, and tell your story back to that person. So what we are really is a portal in which we can create relationships between the people who've been nominated and the audience. And in a sense, Joe and Camilla and myself, who's the core i.Detroit team, the core Human Atlas team, we step aside. We're not on the stage anymore. It's just the audience and the person. And we have a great belief that, you know, the portrait is a fascinating way of communicating visually, but that we have opportunities now in the 21st century to take things up a level. And what we love about our talking portraits is the fact that we, in a sense, give the portrait sitter a chance to have a relationship with the viewer. So what you're ending up doing is you're helping people build relationships. You're helping people understand each other, and perhaps on a much deeper level than if you just written it or it was a video like this. It's a very quiet and meditative and intimate relationship you can have with a portrait that talks back to you and tells you their story.
And you're going beyond that. The book, is it out yet? I know.
Yeah, I've got a copy here. It's available on the Marcus Lyon website. It's absolutely enormous. It's the size of an atlas, a proper atlas. You remember the atlases when we were all at school. I think in your money, it's 10 pounds. In our money, it's 4 kilograms. So it's a monster, but it is an absolute feat of the most beautiful photographic printing and mapping and craft bindery. So as you can see, the front cover is actually a hand, but it's got the map of Detroit in that hand.
You're right. It's amazing.
You were born somewhere just about up here, Henry. So, yep, it's available. And when, anyone who wants to get a copy, very happy to ship them a copy. It's available through my website, but also we're very keen on the idea of this being a very democratic project. So for those who don't collect books or want to spend money, we've actually created a free website, ahumanatlas.com, which has all the information, both visual, spoken, and genetic on it. And you can access all that content for free whenever you want.
It's amazing. So here you have the atlas, and it's beautiful. Your photography is brilliant. But the website, is the goal being to have kind of a dialogue continuing and interaction moving forward?
Well, it's a great question, Henry. We really see this as the beginning. I mean, I think there's a conversation here which we hopefully have started, we've incubated about identity, who we are, who's actually in our communities. And I suppose my greatest hope is that there's a whole generation of young Detroiters and perhaps other people from outside the city who will look at this work and listen to these stories, and they will fashion their lives not in the shadow of the leaders that have come before, but in honor of them. So they'll take the example of personal service, of commitment to community and neighborhood, and they'll take those examples that we've shown in this book, and they'll take that on in their own lives, and they will build opportunities in their lives to create social change within their own communities, their own families, their own neighborhoods, and dare I say it, beyond. So it's a bit like the TED Talk. It's a book that has a challenge in it, has a challenge to say, are you prepared to step up and be counted? Do you want to give something back to your community? Are you interested in making people who are strangers down the road your brothers rather than others? Are you happy to walk down the street on the bright side of the street? Are you happy to open your heart up to others and see that difference is actually a huge joy in our lives, and that difference is something to be celebrated rather than to be denigrated?
Kind of the theme of Gracefully Graying. Our tagline is living life fully, and what you're doing is a prime example of that. Marcus, where's your next atlas?
Well, we've got the great honor of having been already commissioned to produce Decoded, a human atlas of Silicon Valley. So the Packard Foundation, which was born out of Mr. Packard's success making printers and inks and various other things. The Packard family foundation has sponsored us to create Decoded, a human atlas of Silicon Valley. And we're presently in the process of creating the nomination committee, and we're going to spend part of December bringing together the 100 people who will feature in that new atlas.
I'm going to digress, because here, one of the favorite series that a lot of friends, family, and people I know watch is called The Crown. And it's about the royal family, fictionalized, but there's some truth to it, I'm sure. You have photographed the Queen of England. Tell us about that.
I think I've photographed a couple of the princes as well, but you don't really put that on your CV. If you photograph the Queen, that's the only one you need to bother with. Well, it's an amazing honor and a great joy, and obviously it's a great thing to be able to put on your calling card. I think what I would say though is one of the things I've always liked the most about the Queen is I think the Queen would speak the same to the janitor as she would to another, member of a royal family of another country. And I think if she was in conversation with the janitor, she would finish the conversation with the janitor before she turned to whoever her Royal Highness was from another country and start another conversation. So I think that, it was a great honor to photograph. Right? I think if a lot of people would do well to follow her guiding principle of service. I mean, I don't think the royal family is without its complications, shall we put it, but I think the Queen is an incredible servant to our people, and it was fabulous. And I think when I think back on it, though, I think I've had as much joy photographing people who are not well known as I have had photographing people who are well known. Although I'm always very happy when I meet people who are celebrities or extremely famous, who have extremely nice manners and are extremely polite, because you're always slightly expecting them to be a little bit full of themselves. And when you find out they're deeply grounded and down to earth and extremely likable, it sort of makes you think, well, you've got all this success and finance and money and notoriety, but actually you're kind of worth it.
Marcus, you photographed 3 British prime ministers as well. Who were the 4? Okay, tell who.
John Major, Margaret Thatcher, David Cameron, and Tony Blair.
Have you photographed any other members of the royal family besides the Queen?
I photographed Prince Andrew, who doesn't get a very good press right now, a while back. But I think that's it. Yeah.
And your work is in museums. Where are your photographs, and tell us about the ones that are in museums?
Well, the work's been collected pretty much across the board. I mean, there are people who have collected my photographs at the Smithsonian Institute in DC, and I've got work in the British Arts Council collection. I've got my books and my photographs are in the Art Institute of Chicago, and I've also got pictures at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. Detroit Institute of Art carries some of my work. So there's a whole range of different institutions that have collected the work, but I think I'm probably proudest of my relationship with the Smithsonian. And the Smithsonian actually commissioned us to do a fascinating piece on the migration journeys of Israeli scientists who have got a big migration journey. So we went to Israel and we met with 22 extraordinary Jewish Israeli scientists working across the board in the different institutions in Israel, Tel Aviv University, Hebrew University, Technion up in Haifa, and then Ben Gurion down in the south. And and the Weizmann Institute, of course. And we photographed all these remarkable scientists who'd had these incredible migration journeys to Israel and had created the most extraordinary scientific discoveries over the years.
When we started this discussion, you mentioned the fact that you had done an atlas in Brazil. Was that your first atlas?
Yes, I mean that was the very first. I mean, I had the great fortune to meet my wife on a bus in India about probably about 15 years ago, and she's a Brazilian national, a Brazilian environmentalist. She works on economic redevelopment processes with indigenous communities in the Brazilian Amazon and Cerrado. And she and I fell in love, and we made a family, had some children. And before we were under what I like to call the tyranny of term time, we had the discussion about whether we could go to Brazil as a family with the 2 children and do a really deep dive portrait project. And it was within those conversations about trying to record the social change agents of Brazil that we built the Human Atlas model. So the methodology of bringing sound and images and DNA together in the same place to map a group of amazing people, that was built on the back of the Somos Brazil initiative. It took us about 3.5 years. We did 22,000 kilometers travel across Brazil, meeting people in every state and every place. We had some photographs where we literally spent 3 days traveling into the interior to find somebody remarkable and take their photograph and record their story. It was the most wonderful journey. And then it was that book and that project which landed on desks in the Smithsonian, at the Kresge Foundation, at the Packard Foundation, across the world, that has inspired all the commissioning and all the projects since. Because we also did a Human Atlas in Germany called We Deutschland, which is also published as a book, and we exhibited in Hamburg. And that explores the social change agents, the people working in diversity and in a more open society in Germany, which was a remarkable project to do as well.
So to date, you've done Brazil, you've done Detroit, you've done Germany, you're going to Silicon Valley. Have we missed any?
Well, I suppose the Alia projects in Israel that we did with the Smithsonian was a sort of mini Human Atlas. It was smaller of scale, and it was more, it was for the, I think it's called I think it's in a new gallery that's going to be in the Smithsonian Institution called The Faces of the Planet. But it was like a mini Human Atlas as well. But it didn't have quite the depth. We didn't do the DNA, and we haven't published soundscapes, although we did record interviews with everyone. So we do hold all the data that we need.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to become a photographer?
Well, it's a tricky game. I've been very lucky. It's a huge gift. Being a photographer is like, if you can get it right, it's like having a red carpet to anywhere and everywhere you ever wanted to go, because the camera is your reason to be there. So you can, whatever you're interested in, you can choose to photograph it and become engaged with it, whether it be an issue or a place or a group of people or a type of performance or anything. I mean, the camera is, it's an amazing gift. And for me, it's been a way that I managed as an adult, as a human, to find my voice. So yeah, I mean, I would encourage anyone, but I would say that there are 3 key things you need. You need great ideas. Your photographs can't just be pretty pictures. They need to be based on something that you really thought through. I think it depends enormously on your ability to reinvent yourself, to create new things. You can't just sit still and take the same great picture again and again and again. You need to reinvent. And thirdly, it's a lot of hard work. So if you're not someone who's up for a really, really, a life of grit and, late nights and early mornings and sleeping in the back of trucks and going places which is, beyond the furthest hill you could imagine, across the furthest sea, don't do it.
We're out of time. I wish we had more time. To me, you're a true Renaissance man who's continually reinventing yourself. Your creativity is astounding. Marcus Lyon, I want to thank you so much for being our guest on Gracefully Graying. And I want to thank our viewers for watching Gracefully Graying. Please look up this video on our Gracefully Graying YouTube channel, and of course, like and visit gracefullygraying.com. Thank you.